Imagine, if you will, like cleaning up after a genuinely gruesome, bloody battle.
Right.
You're just exhausted, your adrenaline is crashing hard, and you're searching through this dusty attic.
Just moving boxes around.
Exactly. You're moving aside mundane wooden boxes, old clothes, and then suddenly you discover this glowing red quill.
Which is such a striking image.
It really is. And, it just looks like a neat little curio at first, maybe a magical novelty or something.
Right, just a trinket.
Yeah, until you find out it is literally an artifact that rewrote the bloodlines of an entire race.
It's the ultimate narrative bait and switch.
Yes.
You think you're dealing with this very localized, local mess, and suddenly you are holding a piece of foundational cosmic history in the palm of your hand.
And that exact pivot is what we are dissecting today. We're looking at the notes you sent over from your latest source material, specifically focusing on how the story escalates so wildly between Session 6 and Session 7.
Yeah, the pacing is just incredible.
It really is. So for this deep dive, we are going to bypass the interpersonal role play and look strictly at the narrative architecture.
Which is fascinating on its own.
Totally. We want to show you, the listener, how a story seamlessly escalates from a bloody crime scene to a high-stakes artifact appraisal, right into a tavern ambush, and then finally ending with a one-way ticket to the Nine Hells.
Which is really a masterclass in momentum,
Oh, 100%.
We're going to break down how a narrative builds that momentum by taking every single solution the characters come up with and, well, weaponizing it into a brand new, much larger problem.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the immediate aftermath of this massive Bylist cult massacre at the Eomain estate in Session 6.
Right, the dust is barely settled.
Barely. And for context, Byle is the god of murder, so his cultists are notoriously messy.
Very messy.
There are literal corpses stacked in the mudroom, a summoning circle burned to the floor, and right in the middle of this horror movie scene, there's a knock at the door.
Yeah.
It's Valeria.
The official investigator for the City Watch.
Yes, but she's a Hollyphant.
Right.
Which, for those unfamiliar, imagine a small, winged, golden, elephant-like celestial being.
It's such a bizarre contrast.
It is,
Yeah.
and the character detail here is just wild. She pushes past the party, makes herself completely at home in the estate's office, and proceeds to drink an entire bottle of their house brandy.
Just totally unbothered.
Completely. All while just dismissing the threat of the Bylist cultists. The party points to the literal pile of bodies, and Valeria basically rolls her eyes and says the authorities don't have jurisdiction here anyway.
Which is a highly specific choice by the storyteller.
I'm going to stop you right there, though, because I actually have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, sure.
As someone consuming this story or playing in it, isn't that just incredibly frustrating?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if I found a pile of cultist bodies and the literal celestial cop just drank my booze and left, I'd feel like the story was broken. How does a storyteller walk the line between motivating the protagonist and just, annoying the audience with a useless NPC?
That is completely valid frustration, but I'd argue it's a necessary structural evil.
How so?
Well, it's about utilizing bureaucratic apathy as a plot device. Let's look at the alternative. If the authorities had stepped in, competent and ready, what actually happens?
I guess they take over.
Exactly. They confiscate the evidence, they arrest the remaining suspects, they secure the crime scene, and the plot just grinds to an absolute halt for the main characters. They become bystanders.
Oh, I see. By making the official investigator utterly useless, the narrative forces the protagonists to drive the plot forward themselves. They literally can't hand the responsibility off.
Exactly that. It is a deliberate trick to avoid railroading the party while still closing off the easy out.
Makes sense.
The authorities won't save them. So because they're officially on their own, their attention has to pivot to the MacGuffin.
That floating, glowing red quill they found in the attic.
Right, the Calamus Pactum.
Which kicks off this incredible chain of events. Because they can't just hand it to the Watch. They take it to a proprietor named Helsik at the Devil's Fee.
Yeah.
And Helsik takes one look at it and essentially says, this is way above my pay grade. Do not touch the pointy end.
Which is always reassuring.
And that leads them to a midnight meeting with an infernalist named Carilla at a notoriously lawless tavern called Rat's Run.
Right.
Then Carilla summons an appraiser, Vale, the assessor.
An Aranese antiquarian, which just conceptually is fantastic.
It's so cool.
And Aranese is a fallen angel,
Right.
A devil of the hells. And she's acting as this high-end antique appraiser.
And this appraisal scene is an absolute masterclass in world building. Vale doesn't just pull out a jeweler's loop or something.
Right.
She teleports the entire party instantly from this grimy, sticky-floored tavern into her grand, searing, hot office in Dis.
Which is the second layer of the Nine Hell.
Yeah. And the sensory details are incredible. You can literally feel the oppressive, moisture-leaching dry heat in the writing.
Oh, definitely.
And then she begins the mechanical process of the appraisal.
And the physical mechanics here are what really ground the fantasy. She uses a massive golden scale. First, she tries to balance the quill against soul coins.
Let's pause and explain those, because they are a huge deal in this setting.
They really are. A soul coin is the literal currency of the Nine Hells. It is not just, stamped metal.
Right.
It is forged from infernal iron and contains a bound human soul.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah, they're used as infernal batteries to power the war machines of hell, or traded for immense favors. So they are incredibly heavy, both physically and metaphysically.
But the quill is heavier.
Yes.
No matter how many trapped souls Vale piles onto the other side of that scale, the quill weighs more.
Which sets up the snakes perfectly.
And here's where it gets really visceral. Vale pulls out a jar, reaches inside, and pulls out a blackened, oozing anatomical heart.
Ugh.
Right. It's dripping this infernal soot that is so corrosive it actually singes and hisses against the solid iron floors of hell.
Wow.
She puts the heart on the scale, and it balances perfectly. Vale's eyes turn into these shimmering pools of black obsidian, and she drops the lore.
The lore drop that basically recontextualizes the entire campaign.
Exactly. She reveals the Calamus Pactum was forged by Asmodeus himself, the Lord of the Hells.
Right.
He forged it from the wing of a fallen celestial, and it was the exact pen used to sign the original pact with the Toril 13.
Which is incredibly deep lore.
It is. It's the pact that fundamentally explains why tieflings in this world carry infernal blood. The bloodlines of an entire race were rewritten with this single object.
It's massive.
And then Vale hands them a certificate of authenticity.
Of course she does.
Right. Naming the party as the joint legal owners of the pen under the laws of hell.
The bureaucratic touch at the end really sells it.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy, because to me, this is like the ultimate, most terrifying episode of Antiques Roadshow.
Oh, I love that.
You find a neat old fountain pen at a garage sale, you take it to the PBS appraiser, and they look you dead in the eye and tell you it's the exact pen used to sign a cosmic declaration of doom.
Yep.
And also, congratulations, you're the new legal guardian of its radioactive curse.
I'll actually build on that analogy because it's actually worse than a radioactive curse.
How so?
Radiation is passive, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't actively whisper into the ears of everyone around you trying to corrupt them or draw them in.
Mm-hmm.
What we are seeing here is the textbook definition of narrative escalation.
I mean, they just went from investigating a creepy family's basement cult to possessing an artifact of a god.
Right.
How does a revelation of this magnitude fundamentally change the genre of the story they are in?
It shifts the entire axis of the plot. It goes from a localized urban murder, who killed who in the E-Main Manor, to a plainer historical epic.
Wow. Yeah.
The scale of the world just expanded exponentially. But with that expansion comes a very specific, unbreakable narrative rule.
Which is?
Cosmic significance attracts deadly attention. You simply cannot possess an item of this magnitude without the universe reacting to it.
So you can't just walk around with Asmodeus' personal pen in your pocket and expect to go buy groceries in peace.
Definitely not. And that causal reaction is what naturally triggers the massive shift into the events of Section 7. The narrative demands a physical consequence for this new knowledge.
And man, does the narrative deliver that consequence immediately.
Oh, yeah.
We jump straight into the ambush at the Rat's Run Tavern.
Right.
The party has just gotten back from hell. They're sitting in a booth trying to process what they just learned, and the doors burst open. Enter Zulvek Thom.
Such a fantastic, terrifying antagonist introduction.
He really is. He is a tall, imposing, pale man with glassy eyes. He's undead. He doesn't even breathe.
Right.
He walks in with a squad of Taiyan warriors, these notorious lethal red wizards and their enforcers.
The worst of the worst.
Yeah. Zulvek demands to know who has the Calamus Pactum, and just to make his point, he smashes his forearm clean through a solid wooden table.
Just shatters it.
Just splinters it into kindling without even flinching.
It's a classic intimidation tactic, really.
Yeah.
It establishes the physical threat level, contrasting with the metaphysical threat of the quill.
But I love the character beat that follows. Valessa, one of the party members, just looks at this terrifying undead enforcer completely dry and says, "Congrats, you're stronger than an over-glorified vegetable."
Which is hilarious, but it also immediately undercuts his dramatic entrance.
Totally.
It establishes her refusal to be intimidated.
Mm.
But from a plot mechanic standpoint, it acts as the match striking the powder keg. It instantly triggers the brawl.
And absolute chaos ensues. It's a brutal fight. Valessa gets slammed face first into the bar hard enough to leave an impression in the wood.
Ouch.
Yeah, but I want to ask you about the setting here. Why have this massive cosmic stakes ambush happen in a crowded, grimy tavern?
That's a great point.
Like, why not have the Thyans ambush them in an empty alleyway where there are no distractions?
That is a brilliant question about spatial combat design.
Okay.
If you put this fight in an empty alleyway, it basically becomes a static mathematical exercise.
Like our hit points versus theirs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By putting it in a crowded tavern, the author introduces claustrophobia and collateral damage.
Right.
A tavern is tight, sightlines are broken by booths and pillars, and most importantly, it's full of innocent or at least neutral bystanders.
Oh, that makes it so much messier.
Yes. It forces the protagonists to make moral choices mid-combat. Do I use a massive area of effect spell and risk burning the bartender? Or do I take a hit myself to keep the collateral damage low?
That makes total sense. And the narrative uses this specific tavern fight to radically expand the world, too.
It really does.
We find out there's a tiefling named Mole just nursing a drink at the bar.
Right, Mole.
We learn she's a local guild underboss. She doesn't scream or run when the Thyans attack. She just stands up, shadows coiling around her fingers, and starts blasting the Thyan warriors with eldritch energy. Like, it's just another Tuesday.
And we can't forget Rhaegar Clawcroft, the tavern owner.
Oh my gosh, Rhaegar is the absolute best part of the sequence.
She is.
Her tavern is actively being reduced to splinters, and she's just watching from behind the bar with an amused smirk.
Just taking it in.
Mid-combat, Valessa is grievously wounded, basically bleeding out on the floor. Rhaegar calmly walks right through the middle of this deadly melee, casually dodging swords, gently caresses Valessa's cheek to cast a high-level death ward spell, tells her to brush herself off, and goes right back to sipping her rum.
Now, I know some people might look at that and see a problem.
I certainly do. I'm going to play devil's advocate here again.
Go for it.
Doesn't having an unbothered bartender who can casually drop high-level protective magic completely ruin the stakes?
Right, the Superman problem.
Exactly. If the local bartender is this powerful, why are the protagonists even needed? Why doesn't Rhaegar just handle the tie-ins herself?
I totally see why you'd think that. But I'd argue it does the exact opposite when handling cosmic stakes.
Really?
Yeah. This touches on a vital point of narrative design. When you introduce artifacts of Asmodeus in planar travel, you run the very real risk of separating the characters from the grit of the setting.
Like they outgrow the city.
Exactly, they become untouchable. But by showing that a local tavern owner has serious magical chops, and that a local gang boss won't hesitate to enter a firefight with Thyan death squads, it grounds the world.
Oh, I see.
It proves to the audience that Baldur's Gate is a deeply dangerous, lived-in ecosystem of power. The party isn't the only apex predator in the city. It keeps the immediate physical danger feeling very real.
Okay, I buy that. It proves they can't just throw their weight around in the city without consequence.
Exactly.
So the fight ends, Zulvik Thin, the undead guy, is put down permanently, and the party is left standing in a ruined tavern.
Which leads to an immediate plot bottleneck.
Right. They survived, but they are now walking targets. Every dark wizard, cultist, and devil in the city is going to come looking for this quill.
And, crucially, they can't protect the quill while also protecting the innocent Eomain sisters back at their estate.
They just don't have the manpower.
Right. They cannot play defense on two fronts.
So the plot physically demands a secure location so the characters can actually move on to the next arc.
Yeah.
So what do? They decide to take the Calamus Pactum to the counting house.
The big bank.
Right, this massive, heavily fortified stone bank built over the river in Baldur's Gate. They meet with Duke Raycath Glitterbeard, a very pragmatic guy who loves a good vintage wine.
Great character.
And they lock this world-altering infernal artifact in a standard bank vault, combination 04512.
It is a profoundly mundane solution to a highly mystical problem.
And this is where I am totally hung up.
Okay.
This feels like a massive plot hole to me. They just put Asmodeus' personal soul-binding pen in a regular mortal bank.
Yeah.
Isn't that essentially like putting putting a radioactive core in a safety deposit box at your local branch.
Pretty much.
You're
Yeah.
just planting a bomb in the middle of a populated city and hoping the vault door holds.
It absolutely is a bomb.
Hmm.
But I'll push back on calling it a plot hole,
Okay, why?
because it is actually a brilliant, intentional story pivot. From a mechanical standpoint of running a campaign or writing a novel, you have to free up the protagonist's hands.
Right.
If they are constantly bogged down by defending the MacGuffin, they can never go on offense. They can never travel or initiate new storylines.
Okay, so stashing it is a mechanical necessity to keep the story moving.
Yes. However, it leverages the concept of Chekhov's gun beautifully. It creates a lingering, suffocating tension for you, the listener.
Oh, because we know it's there.
Exactly. We know the pen is there, we know how powerful it is,
Mhm.
and we know mortal bank vault aren't designed to hold back the forces of hell or the Red Wizards of Thay forever.
That's true.
It is a ticking time bomb deliberately left in the background of the city. The storyteller has given themselves a plot device they can detonate whenever the pacing requires it.
I love that perspective. It solves the immediate problem for the characters, but guarantees a much bigger problem for them later.
Exactly.
And because their hands are finally free, the plot immediately, and I mean the second the vault door closes, calls in the debt from Session 6.
Because the appraisal in Dis wasn't free.
Nothing involving devils ever is. Corilla, the infernalist who originally arranged the meeting with Fail, needs her favor.
Right.
She paid the soul coin for the appraisal up front, and now she's collecting. And she doesn't mince words. She tells the party to pack provisions for 3 days and meet her at dusk.
They are traveling off-plane.
They are going back to the Hells.
This is the ultimate crossing the threshold moment in narrative structure. They are leaving the known world behind.
And it provides these fantastic character wrap-ups before they cross that threshold.
Oh, they're so good.
Valessa casually stops by her family home and essentially says, "Hey, I'm finally taking everyone's advice and going to hell. See you in 3 days."
And her siblings jokingly warn her not to get a burn.
The juxtaposition of mundane domestic life with the terror of planar travel is such a great grounding technique.
It really highlights the absurdity of their situation.
And then there's Quilbit, Valessa's imp familiar. Quilbit is genuinely, existentially terrified of going back to the Hells. Let's explain why, because the mechanics of death in this universe are fascinating.
They are. So if a devil, like an imp, is killed in the mortal realm, they aren't truly dead.
Right.
Their essence is just banished back to the 9 hells to reform. It's painful, but it's temporary. However, if a devil is killed while in the 9 hells, their death is absolute and permanent. Their existence is just erased.
So Quilbit refuses to go, and they leave her behind to babysit the mortal Eomaine sisters.
Yeah.
An immortal imp, terrified of permanent death, babysitting mortal teenagers. I'm sure that will go flawlessly.
If we step back and look at how this perfectly structures a narrative chapter, it's incredibly elegant.
It really is.
Think about the sequence of problem solving here. A massive secret was uncovered in the attic. The immediate physical threat of the Thayans was neutralized at the tavern.
Right.
The long-term threat of possessing the artifact was temporarily paused by the bank deposit. All the loose ends of this specific Baldur's Gate arc are tied off, which leaves the character standing before a new threshold, completely unburdened, forced into a completely different environment.
It is a textbook transition into a new act.
Completely.
The pacing across these 2 sessions is just relentless in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Just to summarize the sheer ground covered, we went from a bloody house cleanup with a deeply annoying Hollyphant investigator to discovering a cosmic artifact that literally wrote the history of tieflings. Then the party got jumped by an undead hit squad in a crowded bar, survived thanks to some very intense local tavern owners, hid a divine artifact in a regular bank vault, and ended the session by packing their bags for a weekend trip to the literal hells.
And what I hope you listening to this take away from this analysis is how a well-constructed plot doesn't just string random events together on a timeline.
Right.
It's not just, this happened and then this happened. It is a strict chain of causality. Every single action forces a specific logical reaction.
Let's track that chain.
Finding the quill caused the need for an appraisal. The magical signature of the appraisal attracted the Thayans. The violent ambush by the Thayans forced the party to use the bank deposit to free their hands, and the soul coin cost of that original appraisal forced the journey to hell. It is cause and effect woven perfectly.
Cause and effect all the way down to the hells. But before we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to mull over.
I love these.
Something we haven't touched on yet, but that has been bothering me since the appraisal scene.
Okay.
Think about this. Back in Dis, Vale gave the party a certificate of authenticity. It legally names them as the joint owners of the Calamus Pactum.
Specifically under the laws of hell.
Right. But infernal law is notoriously tricky.
Oh, absolutely.
It's entirely based on fine print, loopholes, and unforeseen consequences. If you are legally recognized by a devil as the owner of the pen that Asmodeus himself used to draft cosmic, soul-binding contracts under the laws of the Nine Hells, does that mean you also just inherited the responsibility or the liability for the contracts it signed?
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying thought.
Right.
That raises a massive question about what ownership truly means when dealing with a bureaucracy of literal demons.
Yeah.
You might own the pen, but do you now owe the debt?
Exactly. Did this party just accidentally sign up to underwrite the souls of the Toral 13?
Guess we'll have to see.
We'll definitely have to see how the next sessions play out. Keep analyzing the stories around you, look for those unbreakable chains of cause and effect, and remember, if you ever find a glowing red quill buried in your attic, maybe just leave it in the box. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.